There's a tribe in the Amazon rainforest that performs the most painful coming-of-age ritual known to man. In order to enter manhood, the boys must wear gloves containing hundreds of bullet ants for 5 to 10 minutes. The ants are woven into the gloves with their stingers pointing inwards, so the hand is immediately attacked with a barrage of excruciating stings. According to the Schmidt Pain Index, the sting is ranked as the most painful in all of nature, described as similar to being shot, as the boy's arm is often paralyzed for days following the ritual. In order to pass, he must endure the process without shedding a single tear, otherwise he has to start over another day. In some cases, it may take up to 20 attempts to fully complete the horrific ritual. In 2019, a Brazilian gang leader tried escaping from his 73-year prison sentence by disguising himself as his teenage daughter who was visiting. He planned on leaving her behind in his place, but the guards weren't fooled by his disguise and stopped him at the exit. 3 days later, he hung himself. In 1962, a 10-year-old boy from Mexico City found an industrial radioactive capsule and left it in the kitchen cabinet of his home. Within a few months, the boy, his pregnant mother, his 2-year-old sister, and his grandmother all died from severe radiation sickness. In 2013, a Brazilian soccer referee was involved in a heated argument with a player and ended up stabbing him to death. Outraged fans quickly stormed the field before stoning him to death, decapitating him, and putting his head on a stake in the middle of the field. In 1994, 31-year-old Gloria Ramirez was admitted to a California hospital with symptoms thought to be related to her cervical cancer. She was acting extremely confused and her heart rate was rising rapidly as medical staff did everything they could to return her vital signs to normal. But eventually, nurses noticed a strange oily sheen on Gloria's body, as well as a fruity, garlicky scent emitting from her mouth. Her drawn blood smelled like ammonia and had strange tan-colored particles floating in it. Soon enough, the nurses were having breathing issues and began passing out just from being around her body. Within a few hours, 23 people fell ill and 5 were admitted to the hospital. Ramirez ended up dying from kidney failure and a hazmat crew was called in to transport her body. It turned out she had been taking the extremely toxic substance dimethylsulfone as a home remedy to treat her cancer, the most likely explanation for her poisonous body. In 1991, actor Phil Lewis, who played Mr. Mosby on The Sweet Life of Zack and Cody, collided head-on with another car in Maryland while driving drunk. He was sentenced to 1 year in prison for vehicular manslaughter when the 21-year-old woman he collided with died. Momcilo Gavrich of the Serbian army was the youngest soldier to have fought in World War I. He was able to join at the age of 7 after his whole family was killed by Austro-Hungarian soldiers. Mary and Margaret Gibb were a famous pair of conjoined twins who traveled with Barnum and Bailey in the 1930s. In 1966, it was discovered that Margaret had bladder cancer, but the two adamantly refused to be separated. The next year, Margaret died and Mary followed 2 minutes later, both at the age of 55. In 2021, Corinna Smith discovered that her husband had sexually assaulted her children when they were younger. In response, she filled a bucket with boiling sugar water and dumped it on him while he was asleep, leading to his incredibly painful death. Florida puppeteer Ronald Brown was the host of a kids' TV show in the 1980s called Joy Junction on the Christian Network. But he was later found to be a child predator who had tons of CP and often fantasized in online chat rooms about kidnapping, torturing, murdering, and cannibalizing children. He was sentenced to 20 years in federal prison in 2012. A UK woman who was taking a nap with her mouth open ended up in the hospital for 3 days after her daughter's dog dropped a deuce in her mouth. This is what a rabies patient looks like when they've already developed symptoms. Rabies causes hydrophobia, where attempting to drink or even just looking at water causes intense clenching throat spasms. This is why rabid animals are often seen foaming at the mouth. Sadly, once a patient reaches this point, there's a 99.9% chance that they will die. Arnold Schwarzenegger had a brother named Maynard who was favored by their Nazi father but died in a drunk driving crash when he was 24. Arnold didn't attend his brother's funeral or his father's. In 1980, a Las Vegas hospital had to suspend workers for betting on when patients would die. One nurse was even accused of murdering a patient so she would win. The extremely venomous blue-ringed octopus has enough venom to kill 10 grown adults. Its deadly neurotoxin can result in patients being fully aware of their surroundings but unable to move. Because of the paralysis, you have no way of signaling for help or indicating distress. There's no anti-venom for the bite, but if you can get a ventilator to breathe for you for 16 hours, you will survive with no side effects. In 2012, the cruise ship Costa Concordia collided with a rock off the coast of Italy, resulting in 32 deaths. When asked why he abandoned the ship while his passengers were either dying or trying to escape, the captain's excuse was that he fell into a lifeboat. He received 16 years in prison for his role in the tragedy. In 1904, 21-year-old Oda Banga was abducted from a tribe in the Congo and transported to the Bronx Zoo, where he was put on display alongside monkeys. He was placed in a small cage with an orangutan as an apparent depiction of evolution. Oda was given a functional bow and arrow to enhance his primitive image and to protect himself from the ape if necessary. Since visitors were far more interested in Oda than the actual animals at the zoo, the exhibit was extremely popular and began shattering attendance records. The zoo started seeing an average attendance of over 200,000 people per month, most of whom headed straight to the primate house to catch a glimpse of Oda Banga. But by 1906, Oda was finally released from his torment thanks to mass public outcry from the black community. A few years later, he attempted to return to Africa, but his plans were thwarted by World War I. After struggling to assimilate into American society, Oda fell into a deep depression and tragically ended up taking his own life in 1916. Mark Wahlberg was addicted to cocaine by the age of 13 and had committed at least 20 criminal offenses by the time he turned 21. In 1988, he was arrested for the unprovoked racist attack of 2 Vietnamese Americans and left one of the victims blind. Marky Mark was initially charged with attempted murder, but only ended up serving 45 days in prison since he was only 16. Here's a video of professional violinist Dagmar Turner playing her instrument while doctors removed a tumor from her brain. They asked her to play the violin during the surgery to ensure that her musical abilities weren't damaged by the delicate procedure. In 2017, an American man consumed a ghost pepper in an eating contest and had to drink 6 glasses of water to cool off. He then vomited so many times that he tore a hole in his esophagus and was rushed to the emergency room, where doctors found his left lung had nearly collapsed. He spent 23 days in the hospital and was sent home with a gastric tube. In 2007, Navy SEAL Mike Day was shot 27 times by 4 members of Al-Qaeda before being knocked out by a grenade. Not only did he survive, but Mike even ended up killing all 4 of the militants and walked away on his own after regaining consciousness. Jeremiah Clarke was a British composer who couldn't decide whether to take his own life by drowning or hanging himself, so he flipped a coin. The coin landed on its edge in the mud, so he went home and shot himself instead. Squeezing someone's testicles very tightly can have roughly the same effect as using an EpiPen, but I wouldn't suggest doing this because it could also kill them. Your body is the weakest from 3 to 4 a.m., making this the time when most people die in their sleep. Dutchman Dirk Willems was a religious prisoner who escaped his execution in 1569. When the guard chasing him fell through the ice in a nearby river, Willems turned around to save him. He was then recaptured and burned at the stake. In 1935, Grace McDaniels became a circus freak show star known as the Mule-Faced Woman and was paid $175 per week. Her severe facial deformity was caused by a cancerous lip tumor that ended up taking her life in 1958. In the 12th century Catholic Church, innocence was judged by dunking the suspect's hand in a pot of boiling water. If God had not healed the wound within 3 days, the suspect was found guilty of the crime. In November of 2004, Peter Porco was struck in the head 16 times with an axe while he was asleep in his New York home. But he miraculously woke up the next morning, made breakfast and coffee for himself, and finally fell dead while picking up his newspaper. He had been completely unaware of his battered state and the pools of blood all around him. In February of 2013, Canadian tourist Elisa Lam went missing while staying at the Cecil Hotel in Los Angeles. Weeks after her disappearance, police released footage of her last sighting as taken by an elevator surveillance cam. In the video, Elisa can be seen looking outside the elevator and jumping back in, almost like she was trying to hide from somebody. She then proceeds to make incredibly strange hand gestures as if she's trying to feel something that isn't there. Soon enough, guests at the hotel began to complain about low water pressure in their rooms. Some even claimed to management that the water was black and gave off a strange smell. Upon investigating, authorities finally found Elisa's body floating in one of the hotel's water tanks 19 days after she first disappeared. Her death was ultimately ruled an accident, with bipolar disorder being a significant factor. After saying he was a murder victim's friend while being interviewed by a local news station, this was the moment when Stephen McDaniel found out on live TV that the body of the woman he killed and dismembered was found.
Do you know anybody any enemies she might have had, somebody that might want to hurt her?
No, we just don't know where she is.
What about in the parking lot area? I know they've been doing a lot of, I think that's where they have recovered the body or whatever they recovered from there.
Body?
Had you seen anything there? Had you seen anything there? I mean, we don't know if this is the same person. You know what I mean? Like, they took out a body there earlier. We don't know if it's the same person or not. So that's how we're trying to ask people if they know who lived there. Are you okay, sir?
I think I need to sit down.
Okay.
Authorities soon brought McDaniel in for questioning, where the murderer kept his body eerily still during a 2-hour interrogation. He was possibly in a dissociative state or simply tried to avoid moving at all to prevent the detectives from reading his body language. Stephen pled guilty to the murder in 2014 and is now serving out a life sentence. In 2012, Anthony Hensley was kayaking in Illinois when he went to check on a swan that was becoming aggressive toward him, causing him to fall out of his kayak. As Anthony tried swimming back to shore, the swan kept relentlessly attacking him until the man sadly drowned. In the 1920s, there was a health drink called Radithor that literally contained radium mixed with water. Its manufacturer claimed the radioactive drink not only provided energy, but also cured a host of ailments including cancer and depression. But the drink was eventually pulled from shelves in 1932 when it started causing its customers' jaws to fall off. While working as a doctor in Canada, John Schneeberger drugged and sexually assaulted one of his patients as well as his own stepdaughter. But he was able to evade arrest for years by implanting a plastic tube in his arm that was filled with another man's blood. The Burnden Park disaster was a human crush that occurred in 1946 at Burnden Park Football Stadium in England. Overcrowding resulted in the deaths of 33 people and injuries to hundreds more. The bodies were then left on the sidelines covered with coats, and the game was later resumed and finished with the corpses still on the field. As part of a grim psychology experiment starting in 1961, triplets Edward Gallen, David Kelman, and Robert Shafran were separated at birth. They were placed with adoptive families who were lower class, middle class, and upper middle class, none of whom were aware of the other siblings or any part of the experiment. According to their adoptive parents, as babies, all three of them would bang their heads against the bars of their cribs in distress. This was likely the result of severe separation anxiety, which continued on as the boys got older. By the time they were college age, David and Edward had been in and out of psych wards, while Robert was on probation after his connection to a 1978 murder. A few years later, they were reunited through happenstance but never fully recovered from their mental health issues, as Eddie tragically took his life at the age of 33 after a lifelong battle with depression. This was the last photo ever taken of Brooklyn freediver Nicholas Mavoli after attempting to set the American record for freediving at 236 feet deep. He completed the dive and resurfaced, gave the OK sign, attempted to speak, and then passed out. He never regained consciousness and died later that day from pulmonary edema. Dr. Joseph Guillotin was against executions but knew they would happen regardless. So he popularized the guillotine to make executions as quick and painless as possible. Unfortunately, it wasn't as humane as he'd thought, since it was later discovered that the human head can remain conscious for up to 20 seconds after being decapitated. This is a photo of Lyndon B. Johnson being sworn in as president just 2 hours after JFK was assassinated, while standing next to Jackie Kennedy, whose clothes were still stained by her husband's blood. LBJ turned to his friend Albert Thomas and smiled while Thomas smirked and winked back. The White House photographer who took this later called the photograph completely sinister. Actress Lisa Robin Kelly, who played Eric's sister on That 70s Show, had a major drinking and drug problem. She was soon replaced on the show and ended up dying of an overdose while in rehab. In 2012, a Missouri family sued the previous owners of the house they purchased after brown recluse spiders started bleeding from the walls. An expert estimated that the house was infested by at least 5,000 of the venomous spiders. In 2020, a Florida man was arrested for allegedly sticking his hand in peanut butter and punching his neighbor who was allergic to nuts. Just last Friday, Idaho Governor Brad Little signed a bill that would allow firing squads to execute death row inmates when lethal injection drugs are unavailable. This is because it's becoming increasingly difficult to obtain these drugs since pharmaceutical companies don't want their products to be associated with killing people. Right. On one night when Charlize Theron was 16 years old, her drunken alcoholic father was firing bullets into the door to her room, threatening to kill her and her mom. While he was reloading, Charlize's mother grabbed her own handgun and killed him. The shooting was ruled as self-defense and she didn't face any charges. In 1704, Sir Isaac Newton predicted that the world as we know it would end around the year 2060. He believed humanity would then progress into an era of divinely inspired peace. A tiger's tongue is so rough that it can lick your skin off with only a few licks. At over 3,500 years old, the Senator was the name of the oldest bald cypress tree and the 5th oldest tree in the world overall. But it was accidentally burned down in 2012 when 26-year-old Sarah Barnes lit a fire inside the tree to see the meth she was about to smoke. After learning from biological tests that Michael Jackson may not have been her real father, Paris Jackson attempted to take her own life. She said she idolized her father so much that the 2013 news led to her overdosing on pills and cutting her wrists before she was saved by the hospital. Firefighters in Illinois found a cockroach infestation so massive that they were forced to burn the house to the ground. They even made a ring of fire around the home so that none of them could escape or move to neighboring houses. After years of suffering from a constant runny nose, Kendra Jackson eventually found out that it was fluid leaking from her brain. After a serious car accident in 2013, she'd been losing about a half pint of brain fluid through her nose each day. There's a botanical garden in the UK filled only with plants that can kill you. It's only available through guided tours, during which many people have fainted due to the toxic fumes emitted by the flora. It holds over 100 deadly plants and is classified as the most dangerous garden in the world. In 2015, a Texas father saved his son's life when doctors wrongly declared him brain dead and wanted to take him off life support. He barricaded the hospital with a gun and had a 3-hour standoff with a SWAT team until his son squeezed his hand. His son went on to make a full recovery. This awesome dad got a tattoo of his son's cancer surgery scar to show him that there's nothing to be ashamed of. In 2012, a Texas father beat his 5-year-old daughter's molester to death. But a grand jury declined to indict the man because they decided that he was justified in using deadly force to protect his daughter. This amazing father designed some shoes to give his paralyzed daughter the sensation of walking for the first time. A gay man from Italy named Luca Trapanese adopted a baby girl with Down syndrome after more than 20 families rejected her. Being a single gay man, he was told by social services that he would only be given a child with an illness or disability. He was later quoted saying, "When I first held her in my arms, I was overcome with joy and felt that she was my daughter right away." 6'9" serial killer Edmund Kemper killed and decapitated at least 10 women throughout the 60s and 70s. In 1973, he brutally murdered his own mother before turning her head into a dartboard. Once he was in prison, Kemper was interviewed by former FBI agent Robert K. Ressler. The guards locked them in a small room, and a panic button under the table would alert them when the interview was over. So after the interview, Ressler hit the button, but no one responded. Noticing his panic, Kemper told him, "If I went apeshit in here, you'd be in a lot of trouble, wouldn't you? I could screw your head off and place it on the table to greet the guards." 30 minutes later, the guards finally entered the room to retrieve the petrified Ressler. In 1968, radical feminist Valerie Solanas attempted to assassinate Andy Warhol. She shot him in the liver, spleen, lungs, and stomach, leaving him in a corset for the rest of his life. The woman turned out to be a schizophrenic who called for the extermination of males to create a utopia for women. According to a 1996 Super Mario manga, 1-up mushrooms grow from the bodies of dead Marios, perpetuating the cycle of life and death. In 1971, Fleetwood Mac had to cancel a sold-out show when their guitarist Jeremy Spencer suddenly went missing. He was found a few weeks later with shabby clothes and a shaven head after joining the Children of God, a cult founded by a pedophile that was responsible for the widespread abuse of thousands of children.